Hello again and welcome to Forum for a Better Understanding. It's a privilege each week to be with you with a panel of people who have commitments and real passions about important issues in their lives, personally and professionally. Today we're going to deal with a very important subject from an interfaith point of view. What can churches, temples, mosques, synagogues, and all houses of prayer do to better serve the needs of its congregants who are suffering from mental illness? Mental illness impacts all of us, and we're so glad that we have a panel today that is already working on this and would like to share their commitment with you today. To my left is the Reverend Natalie Chamberlain, the Disciples of Christ pastor of the United Christian Church here in Fresno. To her side is Helen Siporin, a Jewish believer who is president of Mental Health America of the Central Valley. And across from me is Dr. Shazina Haider, who is from the Islamic Cultural Center of Fresno, a licensed clinical psychologist here in town, adjunct professor at Alliant International University, and someone who for 24 years has been a consultant for quality group homes for delinquent children. We have a wonderful panel to talk about this important topic, and I wonder if Natalie could begin by sharing with us, and then the others following, what they are most professionally and personally interested in this topic and why it is at this point in their work so dominant right now.
For me, I'm the pastor of a small congregation, and the congregation is located in what used to be northwest Fresno. It's now more central Fresno. And it's a community in which everyone is welcome. And because everyone is welcome, people come with whatever it is they are living with, and that includes mental illness. And I want to be able to help them in whatever way I can, and to be sure that I have the resources to be sure they get the help they need when they need it.
Thank you, Natalie. Helen.
You know, I was, professionally, I was a special education teacher for almost 30 years. I worked with lots of children with emotional disturbance. But really, it's my family experience, having 4 generations of family members who have experienced serious mental health concerns. And that really brings me to this topic with a lot of passion and understanding.
Thank you, Helen. Dr. Haider.
Always interested in this topic. Observing people or getting to know them was my passion, and it just came natural to become clinical psychologist. And I like to help people. I think it's a very fulfilling profession I am in.
We are so glad that you are here today, all 3 of you, and in the second half of the show we have another person going to join our panel also to enrich you with some other insights from the Buddhist tradition. You pulled off a very important meeting, Natalie, on June 30th. Can you tell us what the hopes were for this gathering, and in a sense, were they met for you?
Well, the gathering was an interfaith mental health focus group, and the intent was to bring people together from the very diverse background of faiths that are part of the Fresno community. And in doing so, wanting to be sure that we recognize that this is something that every community shares. It's not something that belongs to people who have no particular faith community or that belong only to a Christian faith community. Every community faces this. And we have resources we can share with one another. And it was just a delight to meet Dr. Haider and to get to know Helen a little better and to see what we do have in common. It wasn't a big enough gathering as far as I was concerned, but it was a wonderful gathering, and hopefully we can go forward from there.
Helen and Dr. Haider, you were there, of course, and had some strong participation. What did you see happening? What most impressed both of you?
Well, for me, the Imam at ICCF, Imam Ghazvini, has every now and then consulted and asked for some help or made some referral to the ones with the Muslim faith, and if they're suffering or have mental illness or mental health problems. And I always try to provide the pro bono consultation. So when he asked me to come to Interfaith meeting, I felt privileged because I work with diverse populations from last 25 years. I work with all faiths, and I thought this would be the best way to find a way to work together with the people of faith, because that's an additional tool in treatment, in my opinion, as a professional.
Helen, what most impressed
For me,
you?
Jim, it was hearing that the impact of our budget issues and the problems of the economy are affecting all faiths, all members of the community, and there was such a clear openness and desire on the part of the faith community to find what can we do, what's doable that we can participate in helping with the situation.
Right.
Natalie, and then both of you also, why would we want to put together in one sentence spirituality or faith, let's say, and mental health? What is there of connection that you know we need to start relating to?
Well, and this is something that Dr. Haider and I have actually talked about fairly recently. You can't have a whole person. If that person has a faith, that's part of who they are. And if you leave that out when you're dealing with mental health, you're very likely never to get to the point of healing where this person can function again. Spirituality, faith is an integral part of the people of our community, even if we don't recognize their faith as belonging in some particular category. Faith sustains us. It's part of who we are.
On the part of the medical and professional community, treatment community too, I think there's a growing awareness in the last 10 years that spirituality is an important part of treatment. A wonderful study was just reported in a journal of medicine that showed that people who believe in a higher power that's loving and compassionate actually recover more quickly from an illness or from a medical procedure. So why wouldn't we want to bring in those tools to help people with mental health concerns?
Has your practice borne this out, Doctor?
It was very, very interesting. In my private practice, in my regular job, I work with teenagers. And then it becomes a very tricky question. If all what I wish is happening, then there is a God, and if it's not happening, then there is no God I believe in. However, with adult patients, I currently have in my caseload 2 my private patients are so religious that I have continuously used their religious faith as an additional tool to grow and heal from. And it seems to me that after my session, I leave them with those thoughts and they use them during the week. So it's such a strength. And I can always revisit that with them and say, okay, well, now what do you attribute this issue to? And how was it solved? And where do you see this going or coming? And the discussion comes due to their choice as dealing with their own mental health issues. And it's so beautiful to have a set of tools. It's, to me, is one of the major tools if that's what their preference is. I don't impose religion as the only topic to begin with, but some of them will bring that in. And irregardless of the faith, I'm obviously from Muslim faith, but when I deal with patients that have different faiths, there is so much common to relate to. And so much power you generate from that discussion, and so much hope you leave them with. So therefore, I believe in this whole concept of combination.
Now, switching a little bit from like religion to economics, because right now there are tremendous cuts being made almost arbitrarily, savagely, brutally. And Helen, I don't want to quote you, but I'm going to. Back in May of 2009, you did write a very important article in the Bee, take care of your mental health because no one else will. No one else can, actually. And then you brought up the whole point of how the slashing of the commitment of people towards the mentally ill has tremendous negative effects. Would you like to start fleshing out your comment, and then I'm sure Natalie and Shazina will be able to say in their own practice how this is proving true.
We really can't, at this point, fund mental health the way we wish we could, the way it really should be done ideally, and these times are even worse. So when we try to focus on recovery, on what we can do to keep people healthy, to keep them from getting ill, And then if they become ill, to catch that early so they don't become sicker. If we want to focus on that kind of recovery, we have to really understand mental health issues and know how to intervene and provide supports at the ground level.
And my own practice within my faith community it's become so much more difficult because I do recognize, and the elders in my congregation recognize what is part of mental health and mental health that is shaky. And we work with the people of our congregation. We provide that foundation, but when it comes to the point where somebody's in crisis, I don't have anybody to call. It's always been hard for people to come forward and say, I have a mental illness. But now when they've got the courage to come forward and we're there to help, what do I have to offer? And so it's a real struggle trying to be sure that my people are cared for. And that breaks my heart, that I can't take care of my people when they come to me saying help.
How is that affecting your own practice, Doctor?
I believe that it's strengthening my own spiritual faith. I have thousands of dollars worth of absolute no reimbursement, free service provided regularly. And I have a hard time saying no to when medical eligibility is gone or managed care calls you and says you can't take any more patients. Now they have to go through a different door and there's a wait of 3 months and the patient is in need. So that is an ongoing issue. Now when they are in crisis and they call, first I give the wellness number. I never closed my door to just private insurances. I always kept even number of managed care like Medicare patients because I enjoy working with the ones that have limited resources. But now when you completely close those doors and say you can't see the provider you used to see for 6 months, it's very hard.
It's terrible.
One of my patients actually ended up, I believe, in some emergency place and then she called me again and then I talked to her. Due to liability issues, it is difficult to see a person with need and say, you're not my patient. And it's difficult to say you're my patient when there is no provision to see that person as a patient. So it becomes really difficult, very, very difficult.
There's a chart, Helen, that you prepared for us. Why don't we look at the chart and maybe you could briefly explain what's going on? What do these numbers mean?
Sure. I think the basic message of the chart is to show how very common mental illness is in our population. And this is taken from the National Institute of Mental Health, and this is across the United States as of 2008, most recent compilation of figures. But if we look at those numbers, I think the best way to think about it is think of a congregation of 100 people. Any congregation. And sitting in the pews, likely 1 out of 4 people in that room have some sort of mental health problem. Maybe it's not debilitating, but it's a problem. 6 out of that 100 people have such a serious mental illness that they really need treatment or it will worsen. And then if you look at those other figures, those are the numbers in any given year in our population out of 100 people who suffer those illnesses. It's no surprise that every year we lose 33,000 people to suicide. And 90% of those people had a mental health problem that was not addressed.
I am sorry that right now we do have to take our break because we're in the middle of something very important, but don't go away because in 1 minute we'll be back to continue this important conversation about the interfaith community addressing mental health issues. Stay tuned.
For over 25 years, KNXT has been serving the people of the San Joaquin Valley with good family television that's just not available anywhere else. It's important for you, the viewer, to help support this valuable tool of ministry. KNXT needs to continue to grow and bring you important programming about your faith. But sometimes it's hard to stop and find the time. Make it easy. Go to knxt.tv and find out how easy it is to support your Catholic television station, KNXT TV.
Hello again, and welcome back to Forum for a Better Understanding. We're having a very important and a very urgent conversation over how it is that churches, synagogues, mosques, temples, churches of all forms, congregations of all persuasion, can deal better, serve better their congregants, their believers, their community, and how it is that clergy can better address the needs of their congregants, be whatever faith it is. We have a special guest joining us right now, the Reverend Kurt Rai, a minister at the Fresno Betsuin Buddhist Temple here in Fresno. And he also has a passion for this ministry. Kurt, thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Could you tell us, as you start, your own commitment to this issue and why the Buddhist Temple does find this a very important ministry?
Okay, well, it's two passions of mine that have come together. I worked in the mental health field for 19 years with people with chronic mental illness that were homeless in Seattle.
Oh, my.
And so then it was interesting because I was working for a nonprofit organization and we could not talk about religion or spirituality to the clients. And during that time is when I was attending seminary to become a minister. And I realized how important it was for myself to have that spiritual component in the mental health work. And so then this is my first ministry, and I came to Fresno, and the two are interconnected. There's absolutely no doubt about it. We talk about mental health and spirituality, but I think they're the same thing. The wellness of a person is very important. And of course, for the Betsuin, our temple is located downtown, very near the homeless programs, and so we actually deal with that on a daily basis with people coming in and asking and having serious issues.
Well, thank you for all that you do in this area and for joining us today, because it's one more professional heard from, and also one more group being represented. Mm-hmm. To think of downtown Fresno, what a wonderful place that we would be talking about as needing this attention more than we give. Now, not everyone is going to come to this clerical ministry by way of a degree and a training in mental health like Kurt has. So how would you see, Natalie and Helen, the ways that clergy will be able to be prepped to actually serve the needs of people who are having these initial disorders that they come to with plaintive cry or real pleading? What is it the clergy can do in this way?
Well, I think the first and most important thing is just to remember that these people are part of our community, and whether we have eyes to see them or not, they're there, and it is just part of that calling to ministry to be able to see what the needs are and to be sure that those with those needs either are helped by the one who sees the needs or put in a place where they can receive what they need. But having eyes that can see with compassion, I think, are the first and most important thing.
What's next, Helen?
In addition to compassion, we need education. We need accurate information about mental illnesses. And we need to work against stigma, because stigma keeps people from getting the help that they need, and they wait, and then it becomes a crisis.
Kurt, what is it that you are seeing concretely the need of your fellow clergymen and clergy women? What do they need that you have professionally?
Well, I think one of the main things is they were discussing earlier crisis intervention, because I think there's a very fine line between when someone's feeling sad and when someone has major depression and is suicidal. Mm-hmm. And I would think that one of the key components would be for people to be able to do a simple assessment saying, okay, this person needs to see a professional right now, or no to him to call 911. I think that's a very specific, concrete thing.
Mm-hmm. Now you've led right to the next exact question, exactly, because there is an answer to that, to filter out the need and to direct it correctly. Helen, I think, knows this the most. What are there of basic trainings that are available that you have been actually helping us become exposed to?
We talked a little earlier, the first segment, from the article about the budget cuts and how difficult it is to finance care. But something we have been able to do in this county, really a wonderful program, is mental health first aid, and that's brought to us by our county mental health department, the Mental Health Services Act funds. And we now have about 20-some people, including people from the faith communities, who have been trained in how to teach a mental health first aid class, exactly what you were talking about, how to recognize signs and symptoms, when there's a crisis, what to say, what to do that will keep that person safe as well as the first aider. So it's a great opportunity, as I say, to get into the ground floor and help people get the help they need.
Natalie, you weren't at that conference, but what is your sense from finding out from others just how successful that did turn out to be?
Well, I had a long conversation with some of the folks that actually were at that training, and from everything that I heard, it's a wonderful framework with all the appropriate tools, but there are enough places so that faith communities, the leaders in those communities, can insert within that framework the spiritual and scriptural pieces that will then give a faith basis to that ongoing training for mental health. Doesn't change the training, but gives it a faith perspective, and that then should be able to help those faith leaders be more comfortable in bringing it into their communities.
Kurt, do you have any acquaintance or experience of this very program in your other experience, or have you caught wind of what they did at this meeting?
Well, I caught wind of what they did, and it was fantastic. Unfortunately, our denomination, we had a hard time recruiting someone for this. But the idea is that I think people understanding, especially like the youth in our churches and temples, to understand that this is part of the fabric of life, that it's nothing to be shameful of. And so when they see some of their congregation members going and learning how to learn these skills, I think that it destigmatizes some of the ideas of mental illness.
I wanted to add on to something that Natalie said. In the training, I was one of the trainees. We were encouraged, as a matter of cultural competency, we were encouraged to adapt as needed to the groups that we teach the first aid in, whether it's to school teachers or to clergy or to business folk, so that it is meaningful and it's comfortable to use the first aid wherever you are. And what really is wonderful about it, it's not teaching people how to be therapists. Can't do that. But it's just giving us basic skills so that we can help our family members, a co-worker, someone we go to church with, help them at some very basic level know how to develop some self-care.
Now, one thing that we've looked at is the positive side of what should be done. I guess I could just take the other tack and say, right off the top, what are some things that immediately clergy of all persuasions want to avoid doing or saying that will actually complicate whatever good professional help could be given? What are some don't do that as a clergy person? Natalie, what's one thing you're going to know we don't do?
Well, there are really two things. The first one is to be shocked, to think that there's something wrong with this person because they've shared that. And the second is, and I know that this happens because it's happened to people I love, but to have the clergy person say, if you just had enough faith, this wouldn't happen. And it's not a question of having enough faith. It's an illness, and it's just one of those things that we have got to, as clergy, get past doing.
So many people have come to us, and they are so sad because they are not part of the faith community. They once were. And because they were discouraged from getting treatment and encouraged to use faith only, they actually got more ill.
Oh boy.
So in order to help clergy and help faith communities include these people, we have to use all of our tools.
What would be one thing, Kurt, that your own life's experience has shown is a definite no-do, and what would be one thing you could share maybe about something positive that you are positively doing?
I think the idea of the word of should is a very strong word. You should do this. And sometimes with the clergy, it's sort of hard not to give direction like that. And because you are clergy, sometimes people put a little more emphasis on that. And so I think we can be counterproductive and make people feel guilty about their illness, perhaps. On the positive side of it is that I think that there are services in the communities. I am currently working with a gentleman who is homeless. I see him every day. He comes to our service. And he's been a Buddhist for over 30 years.
Oh my.
And he was very clear when he came. He says, I have all my needs met, meaning that he's got shelter, he's got his medications and the like. And he says, I just need to talk to someone about my spiritual belief because I am a minority in the religious community of Fresno.
Oh, yeah.
So he says, I appreciate everything that people have done for me at the mission, but I need someone to talk to. And what is the meaning of life? And so we all have a different perspective on that. But for him to come and he says, I have my basic needs met, please just listen to me. Listen to me.
What a beautiful way to almost end the program, because we only have about a minute or two. But Helen, you have enough time if we put up that picture that's going to explain Mental Health America of Central Valley. Tell us how they'll reach some help there.
You can call us and you can email us. We will be happy to direct you to any agencies and organizations and online supports, any information. All that's what we're about, is just giving information and support to people.
The number is so easily reached here, 559-253-2204. And then there is the email to Dave W.
He's our executive director.
And Dave will be very glad to be able to follow up with any of your questions about this issue. I want to say that if you enjoyed this program but want to continue talking about it, we have a great place to go online. Go to knxt.wordpress.com. And we will be able to connect with you and you with others over mental health issues in the Valley and how religion could be helpful in healing. Also, if you didn't see this whole program and would like to see it again, and you want your friends to see this wonderful program we just gave you, go to youtube.com/KNXT1. And if you go to that YouTube site, you will be able to see the persons around this table share around their own commitment to this very urgent issue. It's not going to go away tomorrow because we created a program for you. It's not going to go away because we had a wonderful panel share what they're doing about it. But it will be something we as believers of all different faiths will at least have the satisfaction of knowing we did not put our heads in the sand, and we did not avoid admitting that this is something we are needing to do something about. Because not to do something about something is to not be faithful. See you next week. God bless.